This is the video walkthrough for the instructions for the solderless switch build. The solderless switch casing is created by Makers Making Change. So for this build, you'll need the following materials: a switch body printed from a downloaded file from Makers Making Change's website, a 12mm tactile switch, a 3.5 mono audio cable, the male end, a zip tie, 2 butt connectors, or have a couple extras on hand just in case. Tools: you will need a wire cutter with a crimping end. If you don't have a crimping end on your wire cutter, needle nose pliers will work. Also a flush cutter. If you do not have a flush cutter, you can use scissors. It is optional to use super glue in this build, but it can be made without. And also a heat gun or a lighter for use with the butt connectors. So this is the first step of the build. You're going to take your wire, the 3.5mm mono jack, the male end. This wire will already be pre-cut, or you might have cut it beforehand. What this step is to do is to take and expose the wires inside by removing the casing of the outer black rubber and the casing inside to expose the copper wires for the white wire and the one that is pure copper. So what you want to do is basically cut about finger length off. If you cut off more than that, that's okay. It could always be cut down later on. What you could do first is look here on the wire cutter. It says 1210 AWG. For this wire, you can go into the number 12, squeeze and pull, and what will happen is you will expose the wires underneath. At first, these copper wires are frayed, so you want to kind of collect them and put them together by just pulling them apart from the other side. And you can at this point start to twist it to make it nicely tightly wound. And on the other end, you'll see that there's a wire, but it's covered in a silver foil. So you want to try to get that off. You could kind of twist it up a little bit until you kind of bundle it up and you can get it exposed. And you remove it. You could remove it with your finger if it's easy, or you could use a pair of scissors. Now you will see there's a copper wire, and on the other end is a white wire. And for the white wire, you want to put that white wire in number 20 or number 22 and do the same as before. And you'll see that by stripping that white outer layer, it exposes the copper underneath. And here, like before, you want to just twist it again so it's nice and tight. Okay, step 3 is to just test to see when you do put the butt connectors on if the fit is going to be good. So I'm going to look here. Here's my butt connector. I'm going to place it over the wire and try to insert it into the metal tubing that's inside of that plastic on the butt connector. I'm going to put that wire inside, and that one looks good. You could see it's covering the wire and no copper is exposed. And on this side, you do the same with the copper side. Push it down until it's inside. And here, this copper, there's a little bit exposed at the bottom, but that's not too bad. If you want, you could take this back out and just cut a little bit off at the end. And put it back in. All right, that's better. So now this copper is not exposed that much. Okay, step 4, you're going to use your wire cutters, the crimping end or needle nose pliers, and you're going to place it at one end of this tube closer to the wire. Place the crimpers on top and firmly squeeze down. What's going to happen is you're going to crimp onto the wire underneath to establish a connection. And it should leave a little bit of a mark on the plastic. And you're going to do the same thing on the other side. Squeeze nice and firm. Again, if you don't have crimping pliers, will work fine. So I have them both tight, and we can move on to the next step. Okay, for this step, you're going to trim the other ends, the plastic part, off by using scissors or flush cutters. So what I'm going to do is basically cut as close as I can, doesn't have to be exact, and try not to press down on the metal underneath, as close as you can. And if you don't have wire cutters, remember scissors will work fine. And good. Alright, so what you should have is basically 2 cutoffs on either end where the plastic is now removed, and you could see more of the metal underneath. Step 6, and this is a very easy step. You're going to look at your tactile switch. On the tactile switch, you could see it almost looks like standing up like a little spider. What you're going to do in this part is basically flatten out these metal prongs that are coming off of the switch. So you're going to flatten them out like that. So now instead of being down like it's crawling, they're going to be sticking out on both sides. Just to confirm, make sure they're flat. Now there may be times that you may have a tactile switch that has bumps on the bottom, plastic little bumps. The ones in this build do not have these, so this step is skipped. Okay, so in this step we're now going to connect our tactile switch to the wire that we already had crimped by placing each end into the metal legs that are coming off of the switch. So you could do it separately. I like to try to do it together so they look even on both sides. So you could see I just basically slipped in the metal into those holes that are there. And while holding it in place, you're going to take your crimpers again, push down on now the other end of the metal rod onto the leg that's coming off of that switch. So you're going to repeat it on both sides. And now it should look like this. You should have a wire coming in, the white, and crimped on both ends attached to the switch. This copper wire crimped on both ends attached to the switch. And we'll give it a little tug. Okay, so after you give a little tug, this is where you want to just make sure that your switch is working. So we'll get our little tester out here, plug it in, and make sure that when you press that switch, that light goes on. Okay, in this step, you're going to carefully heat the shrink wrap that covers the wires so it seals it all together. You can see how it's kind of melted on. At this point of the builds, or occasionally, I still like to always make sure that the switch is still working, so I'm plugging it in to test it. And then an additional step that's not in the slides is to just take a little bit of electrical tape and cut that electrical tape off and wrap it around the section that you already melted, just to give it a little bit more protection. So it looks a little like this. Now in this part, this is where we're just going to test fit to see if this wire slides into our body here. So just to show you on this is with the top removed. What it's going to basically do, these two metal legs that are coming off the switch should slide into the space that's under here in the switch body. And you could do that by pushing up with your fingers. And if you could try to get it on an angle, that usually helps. So I'm going to do that on this one. You're going to insert on the back through the hole and then try to slide it into the switch body. It might take a little bit of force and snap it in, and you can see how it's in there. Now at this point I could keep it in here, or I could go to the next step, which is gluing, and I'll just go over that quickly. Now remember, this is optional, so remember you could just continue with the build the way it is. I could take this back out and add glue right here on the body. And then the next step, with the glue already in place, you can put that switch body back, the switch back in here, push it into place, and then hold it down for 10 seconds on the glue. And just be careful, you don't want to get glue on your fingers. But remember, this is optional. So whether you glued it or not, I'll keep mine unglued here. The next step is to, while this switch is in place, is to take part of this wire, make a loop, and push it into the hole right here. So you're going to see it looks like there's a loop now inside. You could pull it out if you want a little bit, make it easier for later on when we put in the zip tie. Here you're going to grab your zip tie, slide it in from the top. You can see I have the zip tie part, the part that's coming out here on the outside. You're going to push it through this hole, just like this. Now you're going to take it and put it through the other hole, just like that. And then put it through the loop on the other end. So you have the wire going into the hoop. Now here you can put the zip tie together, put it through, and then pull, 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 pull. And then pull on that loop a little bit, and you're going to see there's a loop in there, it's smaller. And now here, you can then tighten it to the best you can on that zip tie. And you should end up to something like this. So it doesn't matter if the loop is small or big. If you pull on it, what this does is it protects it from pulling out of the unibodies. So here, remember, as tight as you can. Once you have that zip tie as tight as it could be, you come in with your scissors or your flush cutters and cut that piece off. And there you have it. You've made a solderless switch. And let's just test it and admire our handiwork.